Under the warm spring light of Washington, D.C., a single mother janitor named Laura Hayes cleans the marble floors of a billionaire's empire, haunted by the son she lost 5 years ago. Upstairs, Amelia Hawthorne, the heiress who hasn't spoken since her father's death, hides behind glass walls with only her German shepherd for comfort. 8 nannies quit. 9 therapists failed. But one night, during a storm that shakes the city, a woman who lost her child meets a child who lost her voice, and a bond is born that even grief can't break. From a glowing collar that reveals a buried secret, to a mother's desperate race through the rain, and a miracle reunion that no one could have predicted. This is the story of how faith, love, and God's quiet mercy can lead the lost home again. Before starting the story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And please, hit like and subscribe if you believe that every heartbeat is worth saving and that miracles still walk among us. Spring draped Washington, D.C. in honeyed light. Cherry blossoms swayed like whispers along Constitution Avenue, and the city gleamed beneath the dome of the Capitol. Yet amid that brightness, Laura Hayes lived in the dim corridors of her grief. Laura was 35, tall but slightly stooped, as if the years had pressed down on her shoulders. Her dark chestnut hair, once vibrant, was now streaked with early silver and tied loosely beneath a gray janitor's cap. Her skin carried the soft pallor of sleepless nights, her eyes a stormy hazel, not lifeless, but haunted. She moved with the quiet precision of someone afraid to disturb the silence she lived in. Every night, while others slept, she cleaned the glass towers of the Hawthorne Group, a tech empire built on ambition and arrogance. The smell of disinfectant and wax polish clung to her like armor. Beneath her uniform pocket, folded like a secret prayer, she kept a crumpled flyer. Missing, Evan Hayes, age 9, last seen April 12th, 5 years ago. It had been half a decade since her son vanished outside a community park in Arlington. There were no witnesses, no ransom note, no remains, only an empty swing swaying in the wind. Since that day, Laura had lived as half a person. A mother without proof that she was still one. She rarely spoke to her co-workers. Martha Green, the head janitor, a cheerful woman in her 50s with kind wrinkles and hands that smelled of lemon cleaner, once said, "You clean like you're trying to erase the world, Laura." Laura had smiled faintly. Maybe I am. Tonight, the 42nd floor of the Hawthorne Group was nearly deserted. The marble gleamed like still water under fluorescent lights. It was almost midnight. Somewhere below, the heartbeat of the city pulsed faintly through the glass. Car horns, laughter, sirens. A world that didn't remember her sorrow. Laura wheeled her cart to the end of the corridor, humming a tune Evan once loved. It cracked halfway through. She forgot the melody. Then, faintly, from behind the door of the executive recreation room, came a sound she hadn't heard in years. A whimper. She froze. The kind of sound a child makes when trying not to cry. Cautiously, she set down the mop. The handle clinked against the bucket, echoing through the hall. Her heart thudded like a drum against her ribs. Slowly, she turned the handle. The door creaked open. The room was dim, bathed in the amber glow of a single lamp. Toys scattered across the carpet, plush animals, puzzles, a dollhouse made of fine wood. And in the far corner, beneath a canopy of soft shadows, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her hair was the color of spun gold, cascading in loose curls down her back. She wore a silk nightgown embroidered with stars. In her small arms, she clutched a German shepherd, large, noble, fur a blend of sable and black, eyes sharp, yet sorrowful. The dog's name tag glinted faintly in the light. Atlas. The child's face was pale, streaked with tears. Her lips trembled as she buried herself deeper in Atlas's fur, whispering words only the dog seemed to understand. Laura's voice softened instinctively. "Hey, sweetheart. Are you okay?" The dog lifted his head immediately, growling low, protective. The sound vibrated through the room like a warning. Laura stopped mid-step, palms raised. Her pulse raced, but something in the girl's fragility drew her closer. The shaking shoulders, the muffled sobs, the way the world had clearly broken her in the same place it had broken Laura. "It's all right," Laura whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." Atlas's growl softened to a whine. His tail gave a faint, uncertain wag. The girl looked up then, finally. Two enormous blue eyes stared back at Laura, shimmering with tears and something deeper, recognition. Not of the woman before her, but of the pain she carried. "My name's Laura," she said gently. "I used to have a little boy. He loved dogs more than anything." For a moment, time held its breath. The girl pressed her face to Atlas's neck again, but this time she didn't cry. The dog leaned forward, sniffing Laura's gloved hand, then placed his head down between them. A bridge of quiet trust. Laura smiled, a fragile, trembling smile she hadn't felt in years. "You've got a good friend," she murmured. The girl's lips parted, just slightly, but no sound came. Suddenly the door swung open. A tall woman stood there, her silhouette sharp against the hallway light. Evelyn Hawthorne, CEO of the Hawthorne Group, the kind of woman the city both feared and worshipped. She was in her early 40s, statuesque, with iron-straight blonde hair and skin as pale as porcelain. Her tailored navy suit shimmered faintly, like armor. Her eyes, cold steel gray, assessed everything in a single glance. "What the hell is going on here?" she demanded. Laura stammered. I heard crying. I thought..." "You thought you could walk into my daughter's room?" Evelyn's voice cut like glass. Her daughter. The realization struck Laura hard. This was Amelia Hawthorne, the only child of the billionaire widow who'd built an empire after her husband's death in a private jet crash. The tragedy had made headlines across the nation. No one knew the true extent of the girl's trauma, only that she hadn't spoken since. Laura bowed her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean..." "Leave." Laura gathered her things quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. But as she reached the doorway, something brushed against her pant leg. Atlas. The German shepherd trotted forward and dropped something at her feet, a torn piece of fabric, faded and frayed at the edges. Laura bent down, her breath catching in her throat. There, stitched in uneven blue thread, was a single letter. E. Her trembling hand closed around it. It couldn't be. She had sewn that same mark on Evan's jacket, the day before he disappeared. For the first time in years, Laura couldn't breathe. She looked back at the child, who stared at her quietly from behind Atlas's shoulder, her small fingers gripping the dog's fur. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Then Laura turned and left, her mop abandoned, her pulse roaring, her world shifting beneath her feet. Outside, spring wind rushed down the marble hallway, carrying the faint scent of cherry blossoms, and something else. Hope. Morning sunlight melted across the cobblestone driveway of the Hawthorne estate, catching on the petals of cherry blossoms drifting down from the trees that lined the property. The mansion itself, a sprawling Georgian structure with white columns and windows framed in ivy, stood regal and cold, like a monument to something that no longer lived. Inside, the smell of lilies and furniture polish mingled with silence, a silence so heavy it seemed to echo. Laura Hayes waited outside the office of the head of security, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was still wearing her gray uniform, though the crisp collar now clung damply to her neck from nervous sweat. Beside the elevator, a wall of framed photographs displayed decades of Hawthorne history. Charity galas, business awards, a family portrait of Evelyn, her late husband Richard, and a beaming 6-year-old Amelia. In that picture, the little girl was laughing. The real Amelia, Laura thought, hadn't laughed in a very long time. The office door opened. Peter Lowell, the mansion's chief of security, stepped out. He was a man carved from routine, tall, broad-shouldered, with a stiff gray mustache and a faint scar running along his temple, the remnant of his years as a Marine. His Navy uniform was immaculate, his expression unreadable. He regarded Laura as though she were a smudge on polished glass. "Miss Hayes," he said curtly, "Mrs. Hawthorne's orders were clear. You entered a restricted area. The company's policies don't—" "Let her in," came a cool voice from behind him. Evelyn Hawthorne stood in the doorway to her office, the morning light cutting through her perfectly tailored cream suit. Her blonde hair was pinned into a flawless twist. The sharp planes of her face seemed carved from ice. Yet there was something strange in her gaze. Tiredness, maybe, or the brittle edge of sleeplessness. "Please, Mr. Lowell," she said without looking at him. "I'll handle this personally." Peter hesitated, then nodded stiffly, and left. The click of the door closing behind him was final. Evelyn turned to Laura, her expression neutral. "You made quite an impression last night." Laura swallowed. "I didn't mean to intrude, ma'am. I heard—" Evelyn lifted a hand, silencing her. "My daughter has not smiled in 6 months. Yesterday, after your visit, she did. I don't understand it, but I intend to." Laura hesitated, unsure how to respond. The woman's voice was firm but trembling slightly beneath control, like glass under heat. Evelyn leaned back against her desk, crossing her arms. "You're a janitor, Miss Hayes. You clean floors, not hearts. Yet somehow you've managed to reach what no doctor, therapist, or private tutor could. Why?" Laura's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything, Mrs. Hawthorne. I just talked." "Talked," Evelyn repeated, her eyes narrowing as though tasting the word. "That's all?" Laura nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes." For a moment, Evelyn said nothing. Then she exhaled sharply, as though releasing a thought she didn't want. "You may continue your work," she said. "On the 42nd floor only. I want to see if my daughter's reaction continues." Laura blinked. "You're not firing me?" "Consider yourself on probation," Evelyn replied, straightening her jacket. "Don't give me a reason to change my mind." Hours later, Laura returned to the 42nd floor. It was late afternoon now, sunlight slanting through the vast windows and scattering pink reflections across the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of wax and spring air. She began mopping near the glass wall overlooking the tidal basin, where the cherry trees mirrored themselves in the water. Through the glass door of the recreation room, she saw Amelia again. The girl was standing silently, her reflection overlapping with the shimmering city skyline. Atlas, the German shepherd, sat beside her like a sentinel. Ears pricked, gaze fixed outward. His fur gleamed under the light, gold-brown along the back, black tracing the muzzle like ink. Laura paused, watching the pair. The scene stirred something deep in her, a faint echo of afternoons when Evan would press his nose against their apartment window, watching for her after work. She pushed open the door gently. The air inside was warmer, carrying the faint scent of lilac shampoo. Amelia didn't turn, but Atlas's tail thumped once, acknowledging her presence. Laura crouched a few feet away, pulling from her pocket a small carved wooden dog. Its edges were smooth with age, one ear missing, the surface stained with thumbprints. "This," she said softly, setting it on the window ledge beside the child, "belonged to my son. He used to believe that lost souls always find their way home if someone waits long enough." Amelia's small hand trembled as she reached out, fingertips brushing the wooden toy. Her blue eyes shimmered. No words came, but a single tear slipped down her cheek, falling onto the toy and glistening there like morning dew. Laura felt her own eyes sting. She stood slowly, heart aching with both memory and wonder, then turned to leave. That's when Atlas barked. Sharp, sudden, insistent. The sound bounced against the marble walls. Laura turned in surprise as the dog padded forward, something clinking softly around his neck. His collar. A charm had come loose. A silver medallion engraved with a small, almost invisible pattern. A crescent moon surrounded by stars. Laura froze. Her breath hitched. Evan's bracelet had borne the same design. Her hand shook as she touched the charm. "Where did you get this, boy?" she whispered. Atlas tilted his head, his amber eyes steady, almost knowing. Amelia looked up too, confused but calm, as if she somehow understood the storm behind Laura's eyes. Before Laura could speak again, Peter Lowell appeared at the doorway, frowning. "Miss Hayes, you're not supposed to be—" "Mr. Lowell?" Evelyn's voice cut from behind him. She had appeared silently, her heels clicking against the tile. "Let her be." Peter stepped aside immediately. Evelyn's gaze shifted from her daughter to the woman standing in awe beside the dog. Amelia was smiling faintly now, clutching the wooden toy. For the first time, Evelyn's composure faltered. She turned and left, without a word. That night, in her study, Evelyn watched the security footage again and again. On the screen, Amelia sat in her golden hair and pale nightdress, smiling as she hugged the little wooden dog. Evelyn's hands trembled. She covered her mouth, tears welling despite her pride. Because for the first time in half a year, her daughter looked alive. And somewhere deep inside, Evelyn Hawthorne, the woman who had everything, understood that the custodian she'd nearly fired had just done what all her money never could. She'd brought her child back to life. The air that morning was soft and alive, touched with the gold of spring. Rock Creek Park lay bathed in sunlight, cherry blossoms carpeting the grass like pink snow, while children's laughter floated from the nearby playground. The world seemed drenched in joy, except for one corner, under the shade of a sprawling oak, where Amelia Hawthorne sat with Atlas, her loyal German shepherd. The dog lay beside her, his sleek coat catching the light, one paw resting protectively over her shoe. Amelia's pale fingers absently stroked his fur, her sky-blue eyes lost in a distance no one else could see. Standing several feet away, Laura Hayes watched quietly, her cleaning uniform replaced with plain jeans and a soft blue sweater. Evelyn Hawthorne had assigned her to accompany Amelia to today's therapy session. For observation, she'd said in her clipped tone. But Laura knew better. It wasn't about supervision. Evelyn wanted proof that whatever had happened between Laura and her daughter could be repeated under controlled conditions. The therapist, Dr. Helen Carter, sat nearby on a wooden bench. She was in her mid-40s, with curly auburn hair pulled into a low bun, square glasses perched neatly on her nose, and a silk scarf around her neck that fluttered with the breeze. Years of working with children had etched patience into the corners of her green eyes. She spoke gently, her voice carrying the measured warmth of someone who'd spent a lifetime walking through other people's storms. "Amelia, sweetheart, do you remember your father?" No response. Amelia kept her gaze fixed on the distance, fingers tightening around Atlas's collar. The dog gave a small whine, sensing her tension. Dr. Carter tried again, softer this time. "Do you remember what he looked like?" Still silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Laura shifted her weight, uneasy. She felt like an intruder in this delicate moment, but she couldn't take her eyes off the child, the way she folded into herself like a closed book. Then, as she reached into her tote for a tissue, a small photograph slipped from between the pages of her notebook and fluttered to the ground. It landed face up near Amelia's shoes. The girl blinked, drawn by the motion, and glanced down. The photo showed a boy with dark hair and a grin so bright it seemed to fight the edges of the paper. Evan. Laura's heart seized as Amelia reached for it. The little girl studied the image for several seconds before speaking in a voice fragile and soft as falling ash. "He's here." Laura's head snapped up. "What?" she whispered. Amelia looked at her then, the first time she had met Laura's gaze directly. "He's here," she repeated, touching her chest lightly. "Atlas knows. He told me." Dr. Carter froze, her pen halting mid-note. "Amelia, sweetheart," she said cautiously. "Who is he?" The girl's expression didn't change. "The boy from the picture. He said his mother would find me." The world around them seemed to stop. Even the distant laughter of children faded into the hum of wind through cherry trees. Laura's knees weakened. She crouched, her voice shaking. "Amelia, what did you just say?" The girl hesitated, then pointed to Atlas's collar, the same one that had carried the mysterious charm. "Atlas found it in the old park. He said the boy wanted us to keep it safe, so that when his mother came, we'd know." Laura's breath hitched. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. The connection, too strange to be coincidence, burned through her like lightning. Dr. Carter watched, startled but careful. "Amelia, you mean Atlas told you?" The girl nodded solemnly. "He talks when no one's around. He told me about the boy. He said he was brave." Laura pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, torn between disbelief and the wild, desperate hope she'd sworn she'd stopped feeling. She had dreamed of Evan almost every night for years, but never like this. Then the moment shattered. A sharp voice cut through the park. "What is going on here?" Evelyn Hawthorne stood at the edge of the path, her cream trench coat immaculate despite the dust, blonde hair gleaming under the sun. Her expression was thunder. "Miss Hayes," she snapped, "I trusted you to observe, not manipulate my child." Laura rose quickly, flustered. "I swear I didn't—" Evelyn's tone sharpened. "Enough. You think I don't see what you're doing? You want something from us. Sympathy. Money?" Dr. Carter stepped forward, calm but firm. "Mrs. Hawthorne, please. The child is—" "Be quiet!" Evelyn cut her off, her control fraying. Her voice trembled now, grief wrapped in fury. "You don't understand. Everyone thinks they can fix her, and all they do is make it worse." Laura's eyes filled again, but this time with anger. "I don't want your money," she said quietly. "I lost a child too. That's all." For a moment, the two women faced each other, one shaped by loss, the other by guilt, each seeing her own reflection in the other. Evelyn's lip trembled, but before she could respond, a sound broke the air. "Mom!" Both women turned. Amelia was on her feet, her voice raw, echoing across the park. "Don't yell at her. She's good!" It wasn't a whisper or a mutter. It was a shout, full and clear. The pigeons startled from the trees. Even Atlas barked in surprise. Evelyn froze, staring at her daughter, as if she'd seen a ghost. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. For the first time in months, her child's voice, soft, real, human, filled the world again. She stumbled forward, kneeling before Amelia, but the girl only buried her face in Atlas's fur, shaking. Evelyn reached out a trembling hand, unsure whether to comfort or beg forgiveness. Laura turned away, the moment too sacred to intrude upon. Her eyes blurred with tears. That night, in her small apartment, Laura opened her wardrobe. Dust clung to every corner. She reached for a worn box on the top shelf and drew out a tiny embroidered bracelet, the one she had sewn for Evan, with a single blue thread forming the letter E. Her fingers trembled as she traced the stitching. Maybe, she thought, fate hadn't been cruel after all. Maybe it had simply been leading her home, step by step, through someone else's broken child. Outside, the city glimmered under the soft breath of spring. Somewhere, a dog barked. And for the first time in 5 years, Laura whispered to the night, "I think I'm getting closer." The storm arrived like a wounded animal, howling across the city. Rain lashed the windows of the Hawthorne mansion in relentless sheets, and thunder cracked over Washington like an angry god breaking the sky apart. Inside, the chandelier swayed faintly, scattering fractured light across marble floors. Atlas, the German shepherd, barked furiously at the window. Ears flat, body tense, as if warning of something unseen beyond the glass. Laura Hayes was halfway through mopping the hallway when she heard the first bark. Her instincts kicked before thought did. She dropped the mop and ran. "Atlas?" she called, heart racing. The dog's bark grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the grand corridors. Evelyn Hawthorne appeared from the far end, wearing a pale silk blouse and black slacks, her hair unpinned for once, wet strands clinging to her temples. Her face, usually composed like marble, was tight with panic. "She's gone," Evelyn gasped. "Amelia's gone." For a second, Laura didn't move. The world tilted. "What do you mean, gone?" Her room was empty, the windows open. Evelyn's voice broke. Atlas started barking, and then a fresh thunderclap cut her off. They both turned as Atlas barked again, racing down the staircase toward the garden doors. Laura followed, heart pounding against her ribs. Outside, the storm tore through the manicured hedges. The grass was slick and shining, a battlefield of petals and mud. Evelyn grabbed a raincoat from the rack, barely getting her arm through one sleeve before pushing through the door. They stepped into the chaos. Wind whipped the rain sideways, cold and hard. Atlas was already ahead, nose to the ground, tail rigid. He led them across the lawn and through the back gate, where tiny footprints, barefoot, unmistakably Amelia's, disappeared into the muddy trail leading toward the old railway line. "Rock Creek tracks!" Laura shouted through the rain. Evelyn nodded, breathless, clutching her coat tighter. The trail led them past rusted fences and broken lampposts until the silhouette of an abandoned train depot emerged through the sheets of rain. Once a proud commuter station, now it stood gutted, windows shattered, vines crawling up the stone. Lightning flashed, illuminating the word Union East Terminal, etched above the entrance like a forgotten epitaph. Inside, the air smelled of mold and old iron. Water dripped from the ceiling into dark puddles. Atlas barked once, then darted toward the far corner. Laura's flashlight beam caught a small, trembling shape huddled behind a column. "Amelia!" Evelyn ran forward, falling to her knees in the mud-streaked floor. The little girl sat clutching Atlas, soaked through, her nightgown clinging to her thin frame. Her lips were pale, her fingers gripping the dog's fur so tightly her knuckles were white. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Evelyn's voice cracked, half fury, half relief. Amelia lifted her, head slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I heard him. The boy. He was calling. He wants to go home." Evelyn blinked, not understanding. But Laura froze. Every muscle in her body went still. "The boy?" she asked softly, crouching beside them. "Amelia, what boy?" Amelia's eyes, blue and distant, met hers. "The one from the picture." Lightning struck again, lighting the room in silver. Atlas whimpered, shifting his paw. As he moved, Laura noticed something strange. The dog's collar glowed faintly, a tiny blinking light under the metal clasp. "What is that?" she murmured, reaching out. Her fingertips brushed the charm that had once matched Evan's bracelet. It was warm, too warm for a simple tag. A small diode pulsed under the metal. Evelyn leaned closer. "Is that—" "A tracker," Laura breathed. "A GPS chip." Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Within seconds, the screen lit up with coordinates. The dot blinked not far from their location, just across the river, on the eastern edge of the city. Laura stared at it, her breath caught between disbelief and dread. That's where Evan disappeared. The exact same place." Evelyn's face went pale. "Are you sure?" Laura nodded. "I marked it years ago on every map I made." She looked up, eyes wet but fierce. "He led her here. He's trying to tell us something." Evelyn hesitated only a heartbeat before standing. "Then we go." They piled into Evelyn's black SUV, Atlas climbing into the back seat, dripping water onto the leather. The wipers struggled against the storm, thunder rumbling above as the car sped through near-empty streets. Evelyn's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, her diamond bracelet catching flashes of lightning. "If this is another false hope," she muttered, more to herself than to Laura, "I don't think either of us will survive it." Laura didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the blinking dot on her phone, leading them toward the outskirts of eastern D.C., to an old row of derelict buildings by the river. When they arrived, the wind had calmed, leaving behind only a misty drizzle. The place looked half-eaten by time, brick facades crumbling, ivy crawling through broken windows. Atlas jumped out first, sniffing frantically. His ears perked toward a basement door half buried under vines. Laura followed, heart hammering. She tugged at the rusted latch until it gave way with a groan. The smell of dust and age hit her. With her phone flashlight, she descended the narrow steps. The beam swept across a pile of old crates and torn fabric, and then it caught something small, something heartbreakingly familiar. A child's jacket, faded blue, with a patch of stars hand-stitched across the pocket. Laura dropped to her knees. Her fingers traced the uneven stitches, the same pattern she had sewn for Evan the week before he vanished. Her throat closed. Behind her, Evelyn stepped down, the Weeksian, light trembling in her hands. When she saw Laura's face, she understood without words. She knelt beside her, laying a trembling hand on her shoulder. "I understand now," Evelyn whispered, tears spilling freely. "You're not just looking for your son. You're helping me find the parts of me I buried with my husband." Laura covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Evelyn pulled her into an embrace, and for a moment they were no longer employer and employee, just two mothers kneeling in the ruins of what they'd lost. Then, faintly, through the quiet hum of rain, came the distant wail of sirens. Laura looked up. Red and blue lights flickered through the mist. A voice shouted from above, "We found something! There's a record, an Evan Hayes, listed at a shelter across the Maryland border." Evelyn exhaled shakily. Atlas barked, tail wagging for the first time that night. Laura rose slowly, eyes glistening with disbelief. And as the first ray of dawn pierced the broken glass above them, the storm finally ended. A week after the storm, Washington, D.C. glowed beneath the soft gold of spring. The cherry trees around the tidal basin were in full bloom, their petals falling in slow, dreamlike spirals over the water. The city had returned to its rhythm. Polished cars along Constitution Avenue, joggers along the reflecting pool, yet for Laura Hayes, time itself had paused. Every minute since the phone call from the rescue shelter felt like an eternity stretched thin by hope. That morning, the shelter van pulled up before the Hawthorne estate. Officer Marcus Reed, a middle-aged man with gentle brown eyes and a square jaw hidden beneath a salt and pepper beard, stepped out first. He was broad-shouldered and kind-faced, wearing a navy jacket marked Child Recovery Unit. He had the weary look of someone who had seen too many reunions, both the miraculous and the heartbreaking. He opened the side door slowly and said, "He's a little shy. It's been a long few days." Laura stood rooted at the top of the steps, her hands clasped so tightly they trembled. Then she saw him. Evan Hayes stepped out from the van, small and thin, with sun-browned skin and hair that curled slightly at the ends. His clothes were too large, the sleeves rolled up clumsily, but his eyes, those bright hazel eyes, were the same. Eyes that once lit up every corner of their tiny apartment, eyes that had haunted her dreams every night for 5 years. For a moment, the world blurred. Laura stumbled forward, breath catching, her voice breaking on the words she'd whispered into countless prayers. "Evan." He looked up, uncertain at first. Then his lips trembled. "Mom?" The sound cracked something open inside her. She fell to her knees, pulling him into her arms. The boy clung to her neck, and for a heartbeat, the years between them dissolved. He buried his face into her shoulder and whispered, "I remember the smell of your soap." Laura's sob turned into a laugh, broken, disbelieving, beautiful. "Oh, my baby." Evelyn Hawthorne stood a few paces away, one hand over her heart. Her usual poise had melted. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her breath shallow, as she watched mother and son reunited. Behind her, Amelia and Atlas waited near the fountain. The German shepherd barked once, sharp, joyous, and Amelia squealed, running toward them. She threw her small arms around Evan and Atlas together, giggling through her tears. Atlas wagged his tail wildly, pressing his muzzle against Evan's arm, as if greeting an old friend returned from a long journey. Evan smiled shyly, petting the dog. "He smells like home," he murmured. The garden filled with sound, laughter, tears, barking, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a mansion but a living heart that had finally begun to beat again. Later that afternoon, under the soft sun, Evelyn held a press conference in front of the Hawthorne Foundation building. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones glinting. She stood behind the podium, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "There are some things," she said, "that money can never buy, like courage or a mother's love." Cameras clicked rapidly. "This woman," she gestured to Laura beside her, "showed me that healing doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from compassion." Laura, still overwhelmed, lowered her eyes modestly. Evan stood beside her, holding her hand. Amelia clung to Atlas's leash, beaming proudly. Evelyn continued, her voice resonating with conviction. "From today, I'm establishing a foundation called Evan's Light, dedicated to helping families who have lost a child and those still searching. Every case deserves hope." The crowd applauded. Some reporters wiped tears from their eyes. Evelyn turned to Laura and added quietly, "And I want you to lead it, as the director of our first project." Laura stared, stunned. "Me?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Who better? You found your son. And you found my daughter, too." Laura swallowed the lump in her throat, glancing toward Evan and Amelia. The children were sitting on the steps, laughing as Atlas licked their faces. For a moment, the world was perfect. That evening, as the sun slipped toward the horizon, the garden shimmered pink with falling petals. Laura sat under the largest cherry tree, her children on either side. Amelia leaned against her shoulder, while Evan traced shapes in the grass with a stick. Atlas lay across their feet, his amber eyes half closed in contentment. "See?" Amelia whispered to the dog, her voice soft as the breeze. "People can find their way home, too." Atlas lifted his head slightly, resting it on her lap, and let out a low, satisfied huff, almost a sigh. His tail flicked once, slow and peaceful, as if he agreed. Up on the terrace, Evelyn watched from a distance. Her face was bathed in golden light, her expression serene for the first time in years. She turned toward the newly mounted glass plaque on the building's front, the headquarters for Evan's Light Foundation. The inscription gleamed beneath the sunset. "Sometimes the heart we heal isn't someone else's, it's our own." And beneath it, the reflection of cherry blossoms drifted like blessings over the glass. Sometimes God's miracles don't come wrapped in thunder or wings. They arrive softly, through a child's tears, a mother's whisper, a dog's gentle bark in the dark. Laura thought she had lost everything, yet even in her years of silence, heaven was still working, weaving a path that led her not just back to her son, but back to faith. When Evan was found, it wasn't luck. It was grace. It was God reminding us that love, when it refuses to give up, becomes a kind of prayer he always hears. Evelyn learned it. Amelia learned it. And maybe, so should we. That even broken hearts can bloom again when touched by something greater than fear. So, if you've ever waited for a sign, this is it. Hold on to hope. Be kind. Believe that what's meant for you will find its way home, no matter how many storms it must cross. If this story moved you, share it, not for views, but for someone who needs to remember that miracles are real. Comment below what moment made you believe again, and subscribe to stay with us, because stories like this aren't just fiction. They're reminders that God is still writing through every one of us. And as you finish this story, take a deep breath and whisper a little prayer for every lost child, for every waiting mother, for every broken soul still searching for light. May God bless your home with peace, guide your heart with love, and remind you that no one who believes is ever truly lost.